Listen, you don't need me to tell you what day it is. You've been hearing about this for months. But in case you need a reminder, Barbie movie is out today. Oppenheimer is out today. It is like the grandest spectacle of pop culture. Today on the show, it is Barbenheimer time. Let's go. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Listen, in a way, it feels like the very reason this show exists is for like a day like this one. Barbie is out. Oppenheimer is out. These two have pretty different movies have become deeply intertwined with each other. It is the culmination of months and months of all the Barbenheimer noise that is now. So we get to go through it together for this very special Barbenheimer edition of Commotion. We've got filmmaker and film critic Chandler Levack, who joins us from Montreal, Vulture writer Jason P. Frank in New York, and from Mashable, Kristy Puchko. Guys, welcome to the show. Let's do this.
Let's go.
It's a big day for me personally. So I hope it's a big day for all of you also. Kristy, I'm going to start with you on this one because it seems at this point kind of impossible to talk about Barbie without also talking about Oppenheimer. Like these two films have just kind of been so intertwined in the discourse. What do you think it is that makes Barbie and Oppenheimer together such like ripe for basically like meme fodder, do you think?
I mean, partially is that it's on the aesthetic level. They're so different. So it's kind of fun to throw them together. And they're doing kind of different summer things where one is being like, hey, everybody, come and party. And the other one is being like, let's talk about death and mortality. And it's Christopher Nolan and Greta Gerwig. And what's so funny is that I feel like people are not prepared for how much these movies actually have in common.
Jason, let's talk about Barbie, because you were on the show like just a few weeks ago talking about the extremely long marketing campaign that this movie has had. It's finally here. Did it live up to the hype for you?
I don't think anything could fully live up to the hype. I'll be
Especially
honest.
That hype.
That was a lot of hype. I thought it was a really, really good movie. It had an exceptional amount of ideas. There were ideas flying at you every second. You missed some, you got some. It was very high volume of concepts.
Yeah.
Did all of those concepts land for me? No, but I'd much rather have a critique of a movie that it has way too many ideas than too few. It's a much more interesting experience. I was constantly on my toes. I was constantly laughing. I was smiling. And sometimes I was going, I don't know if that lands for me. But I was still interested the whole time.
Do you want to talk about some of those concepts?
I think a good thing.
Do you want to talk about some of those concepts that maybe did or didn't land for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think... can we spoil? How much can we spoil?
I would rather we don't spoil, but we can sort of talk around some stuff if we can.
Okay, yes. So I do. It's well written within the press that Barbie goes to the real world.
Yes.
in this movie. I think Barbie in the real world was immediately great. There was so much her dealing with realizing that there was patriarchy in entering the real world. I thought that was all fantastic.
Perfectly executed. Yes.
Perfectly executed and also very real. And once she got to Mattel, I thought that the Mattel vibe was a little bit off for me, largely because it felt so heightened there. But but it's still in their idea of the real world, which the real world otherwise was very, very well grounded. Yeah. So generally, the Mattel stuff I think didn't quite land for me. You know, you could say that it was because they couldn't bite as hard as they might want to because it is a Mattel movie. Mm-hmm. And so in order for them to be a quote unquote villain or criticize themselves, the Mattel executives kind of had to be turned into Three Stooges characters, mm-hmm. which I felt was fine, but it felt a little toothless in comparison to the other critiques that the movie had for the patriarchy mm-hmm. and the way that Barbie was operating in the real world. So that didn't really land for me.
So Chandler, without spoiling too much, the Barbie movie sort of escalates to this climax where we kind of arrive at this idea that acknowledging all of the complex and sort of contradictory ideas of womanhood within the framework of the patriarchy robs the patriarchy of its power. That's sort of a place that it's trying to maybe land.
Yeah, your classic summer blockbuster.
But it's also trying to make all those critiques, as Jason said, within the framework of the fact that this is a movie made by Mattel Mattel Productions. It is also made by Greta Gerwig. Greta Gerwig is kind of considered to be this visionary, this auteur, who's still developing her voice. But you get to this moment and you go, did she have to compromise her voice and her vision in order to make a movie that also has a Mattel stamp on it, do you think?
That's such a great question. I feel like that's what makes this movie, both one of the most interesting movies of the summer and also a terrifying, forebearer of cinema to come. Like, can a female director still get $100 million greenlit movie if it's not a meta pseudo-feminist unpacking of the Mattel, IP as financed by Mattel? I don't know. I think that within the kind of constructs of the assignment that she's been tasked with, which is a very weird assignment, she delivered one of the most subversive and super weirdest movies I've ever seen. Like it feels like it's both a Dove body ad and a Tim and Eric sketch. Barbie contains multitudes.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, that's the thing. It's like I understand people being like, "Oh, well, this is tamped down," and I've heard the phrase like feminism 101 a lot, and like totally it is. But also like this is a movie that I think is for a lot of young women, especially. And I think it's trying to, I mean, it's very on the nose in the third act about how they discuss feminism, but I think it's also literally trying to give voice to people being like, hey, have you noticed this thing? You're not alone in that. Mm-hmm. And I think using Barbie as a tool to do that is incredibly subversive and interesting, but also while recognizing that there's a lot of flaws within Barbie, which the movie does in ways like that are direct by directly being like this and this and this and this is a problem, and like a diatribe from like a very, very heightened tween who gets it, and then conversely by being like, here are some things from Mattel that you may not remember that are hilarious and weird, and like it's kind of it reminds me of like Joan is Awful, not to derail, but Joan is Awful from Netflix, where you're like, oh, there's a really solid criticism built into...
That's a Black Mirror episode, yeah?
It's a Black Mirror episode on Netflix, but on Netflix it's criticizing Streamberry, which is absolutely Netflix. Yeah. And then Netflix did some of the things that happened in the episode, and now the writer strike is like, the actor strike is like literally about these things. So like, it's that thing where it's a weird, uncomfortable place to be in a corporate IP that is touting rebellious ideas because, of course, they're tamped down. But at least then they're like, I mean, how many people are going to see Barbie this weekend? How many people are going to have the opportunity to have a conversation about this? Like, I feel like that's kind of a win. So like, yeah, and I think what's interesting about the film is it is about that conflict of like, is Barbie good? Is Barbie bad? And I think by the same contrast, you can look at the film as like an argument, like both for and against IP.
Jason, what I'm hearing from both Chandler and Kristy is that it was always going to be at a certain level graded on some kind of curve. Like it was never going to be graded as like, oh, here is like the most subversive version of this film that it could be, because it would not have the permission of the people who literally greenlight the IP that owns this thing. Should we be comfortable with the fact that one of the largest movies of the year has to be graded on a curve because it's like corporate critique within the realm of corporate approval of some sort?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can grade it on a curve. I think you can also say that these are issues with it, I think that's the role of cultural criticism. Even if it wasn't possible for it to be a fully subversive movie, I think it's worth pointing out the ways in which it is not, so that people who are engaging in the critique can acknowledge that. Like, from my perspective, I'm not being paid by Mattel.
You're not?
I'm being paid. No, I'm being paid by Commotion to come here and discuss the film fully. So I don't think we necessarily need to grade on a curve. I think we can acknowledge the ways in which this film is operating and the potential that it had, what the maximum capacity even could be. But I think it's also worth acknowledging where it faults a little bit.
Yeah.
I think America's speech is
America Ferrera. Yeah.
To clarify, not the idea of America, which this movie might do. Like, I wouldn't have been surprised. It was a poignant moment. I don't think it was that difficult of a speech to grasp. I think that there's good in that, as a big tentpole movie. I also think that it was a little like gender essentialist, a little easy. And it played a lot like I know Greta's going to get a lot of props for that. It played a lot like Laura Dern's speech in Marriage Story to me, right. which was written by Noah Baumbach, who also was writing the script.
Yes.
So I think that's worth noting. It didn't feel like something I hadn't seen before, and a lot of this movie did.
I am hesitant about the fact that we've been talking about this movie for like 10 minutes now, and we've not mentioned like how fun it is, because it is a movie that is also, in addition to play around with all these ideas, it like never loses its grasp on fun. And one beautiful piece of evidence of that fun is whatever movie Ryan Gosling thinks he's in, because he's having the best time. Absolutely.
Oh my God.
I'm just going to play you guys a clip of him singing the song "I'm Just Ken."
'Cause I'm just Ken. Anywhere else I'd be a 10. Is it my destiny to live and die a life of blonde fragility? I'm just Ken.
That's a song of the summer, "I'm Just Ken" by Ryan Gosling. Chandler, what'd you make of Greta Gerwig's treatment of masculinity through the Ken perspective?
You know what? Ken was the character I related to the most in the movie. I was completely enamored with the emotional arc of Ken.
Yeah.
I did not expect that. America for a speech, I was like, yeah, whatever. But when Ken's like, Barbie, I love you. Why won't you see me? I was like, oh my God. I thought that he was unbelievably committed in a way that I feel like his soul was Ken. It harkened back to his Mickey Mouse Club days in like a really beautiful, unabashed way. I mean, we've seen Ryan Gosling kind of have this like affect of like the sort of fake Brooklyn accent and this sort of like, old sort of persona that he's putting on everything. And it just feels like a shtick. But this actually feels like closer to Ryan Gosling's soul than we've ever seen before. And if he doesn't get an Oscar, there's a true injustice going on, because it's such a fun, wry, winking performance. But then there's this kind of frisson of like total vulnerability and pain behind those dead eyes and his silken abs that I love.
I am already the president of the Ryan Gosling Oscar for your consideration campaign. I'm ready to lead that charge. Kristy, we gotta say, listen, the Barbie doll itself is this iconic cultural artifact that is obviously been lauded at a period of time for promoting different ideas of womanhood, and then later criticized for promoting a sort of, I guess, like certain standards of beauty that have come to be criticized under feminism. But when you get to this movie, right? We have this movie that's made in tandem with Mattel, who obviously stand to make a lot of money from this, not just from toy sales, but also just like literally from the actual movie itself. How do you think the movie grapples with Barbie's place in our culture as this symbol of beauty and capitalism?
I think it's interesting because the film deals with it by having speeches about it, but it also deals with it by having it be Margot Robbie and like, the idea that like, well, no one can look like Barbie. And then you're like, except for Margot Robbie, which honestly, the movie actually addresses at one point, which is very funny and very meta. Yeah. But like, that's kind of the thing, is that I think Greta Gerwig, this assignment of like make a Barbie movie seems impossible, because like Barbie doesn't really have a plot to begin with. That's not her deal. And so like you have to figure that out, but then you also have to grapple with like, what does Barbie even mean and to what generation? Because I'm seeing people online being like, wait a second, like I didn't know there were Barbies that look like the Barbies in this movie. And the answer is like, now there are. Like some of us didn't grow up with that. Yes. But that's also part of the conversation. Like Barbie is, I said in my review for Mashable, like she's a promise and a pitfall, where it's like, girls can be anything they want, except for looking like Barbie and being happy all the time and like having your dream house by the time you're 18, which is in some circles how all Barbie's supposed to be. So like that's the kind of fun thing about Barbie Land in the first act, is like I've seen people be like, oh, the movie's being like, well, matriarchies would be perfect. And it's like, no, Barbie Land is a fantasy. Like, it's no one expects that to work. And also not everyone in Barbie Land is happy. Like, I'll just leave it at that. But like, not everyone's happy. But like, that's the fun thing about Barbie Land, is to just imagine a world like when you were a kid. I feel like it welcomes you back into like, okay, you're completely in control. Everything is pink and go. And like, is that, giving a kind of narrow concept of what being a girl is? Yeah, but it's also just the jumping off point of the film. So like, there's something undeniably fun about just getting to imagine being in that world. And like, man, who among us doesn't want to go down that slide into her like little fake pool? Like I truly
float from the ceiling down. Yes.
Oh, like I just
all of the cinematic textures of it. The fact that she really understood how kids play and how it's just like, hi, Barbie, hi, Barbie, hi, Barbie, hi, Barbie.
Yeah. Like, that's the thing. I felt really like it really reminded me of playing when I was a kid, but also like playing with my nieces who are just playing with children is chaos, and I feel like you do see that reflected in the film with the way the Barbies talk to each other. It's even in that one clip where it's like, actually, Ken, in the time I said that, you're already healed. Like, that all felt really authentic to me with my experience playing with dolls, and I thought that it was very cool how she used a big Hollywood budget not only to bring us into Barbie Land, but also to make all these references to old cinema that, like, maybe not everybody's gonna get, but man, wouldn't it be cool if that became the conversation? But like, oh, you like this, you should see An American in Paris. Like, that's amazing.
That is amazing. But also, I've been legally told that I have to move on from this topic to at least talk a little bit about Oppenheimer. I know! We got to do it in the time that we have. By the way, if you're just tuning in, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. It is Barbenheimer Day. As predicted, I think Barbie took up quite a bit of the space of conversation that we have today, but we got to switch gears and talk about the other major movie that is opening right now. You can't get much further away from Barbie than this.
Are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world?
Chances are near zero.
Near zero.
What do you want from theory alone?
Zero would be nice.
That is a scene from Oppenheimer that stars Cillian Murphy as Oppenheimer, the man credited with inventing the atomic bomb. Listen, Jason, Christopher Nolan is the director of this movie. He's directing a movie about a real-life scientist. That is not normally the kind of thing that makes people go, summer blockbuster. What do you think it is about Christopher Nolan himself that gets people to be like, you know what? This is the major moment.
I mean, he's opened a ton of movies super successfully. Like, he has a lot of, like, classic film bro movies in his repertoire. He's got Dunkirk, which is, like, to be honest, it's the best war movie of the century so far. Like, if you like war movies, that's the one. He's got a resume that is really, really strong. And I think he does do something with Oppenheimer that makes it worthy of a big summer movie. He makes it feel epic. He makes it feel ginormous. And, like, yes, it's about a scientist, but it's also a movie about the world's loss of innocence. It's about seismic science. It's about ginormous feelings. I think you can make a case for it being a summer movie. I understand it. I do understand that.
Chandler, for a summer movie, this is the movie that takes place, remarkable amount of this movie takes place in like little boardrooms with just like men in suits yelling at each other. And it's not, I don't think it's the Oppenheimer that people expected. I think people expected just like a little bit more of, I don't know, literally atomic bombs. And you don't get that. Like the climax of the movie is actually the Trinity test, the time when Oppenheimer tested the bomb. What did you make of the fact that he took 3 hours? Like, this is a 3-hour movie. Christopher Nolan hired an editor challenge. But during that entire time, he kept it in these like really intense, like physically, literally closed, tight spaces.
Yeah, it's so ironic that this is a movie that was shot on IMAX and 70 millimeter, because it's literally just Cillian Murphy's cheekbones, which are so beautiful. But it's just men in hats talking and talking and talking, and then they go on trial, and then they talk some more, and then they build the bomb, but do they want to build it? And you just see these kind of plastic bowls that get filled up with beads that are supposed to symbolize how close they are to actually building it.
Yeah.
And there's only one explosion sequence, and a huge waste of Florence Pugh. It's devastating.
Very that.
Kristy, what'd you make of the movie?
The thing is, I feel like it's I wrote my review. It's very Nolan. It's deeply flawed. And like, the thing is, I think people that really love Nolan movies will really love this movie. It is his kind of movie in that it is a lot of repressed men saying bold statements about things. But yeah, the women in this movie are Nolan women, where you have incredibly talented actresses playing women who are sexy and naked and crying. And, I just like that honestly wore on me, because it was just like, we saw like Emily Blunt and Florence Pugh all over the promotional stuff ahead of the strike. And I was so excited to be like, oh man, what's Florence Pugh going to do in Oppenheimer? And like, I did a little bit of reading about her character, and I was like, this sounds really interesting. And like, none of that is in there. It's her like sulking and being like, I don't want flowers, and being naked. And it's just like, it's frustrating. There's like, you have all these incredible characters and all these incredible people in this movie. This cast is insane.
It's stacked.
Like, truly,
the most stacked cast you've seen this summer. Yeah.
Like, it's truly like if you made it a drinking game, like, you take a shot every time a highly acclaimed character actor shows up, you would be dead by like an hour. And like, I respect that. I'm glad all these people got work, but like the potholes in the film are essentially that like Nolan gets so into Oppenheimer that it becomes very tunnel vision. And like, I mean, you could argue that's the point, but it feels a little exhausting at a certain point where you're like, there are two perspectives in this and they are both just like men who are kind of similar in mode, and that's kind of frustrating.
Yeah. And it's not a traditional biopic. You don't see like Oppenheimer's relationship with his childhood or, you know, the first time he solves a quadratic formula on a chalkboard or anything. It's not like Good Will Hunting at all.
I don't think you want to see that.
No, I don't want to see I don't want to see a traditional biopic. I will say that's like the biggest pro of this film.
I agree.
Is not the Imitation Game. Like, this is not the Imitation Game. This is not anything. Like, it's not something where you're gonna go in and be like, oh, like, okay, I know the beats.
We're doing this. Yeah.
But that's what makes it compelling, right? Like, what makes this movie compelling is that it is not actually a story of how Oppenheimer sort of came to build the bomb. It's a story about how we came to view Oppenheimer differently after he built the bomb, right? And so much of the movie takes place after, like, the movie opens, and so much of it takes place long after the bombs have been deployed in Japan. And so, to that end, like, did that work for you? This idea of here's this movie that is trying to reckon with the legacy of a person who maybe was written out of a particular evil, but then kind of reduced to like one dimension in a sense. So I'll put that question to Chandler.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like one of the things I've been seeing online, and I actually think it's a really good corollary, is The Social Network, you know, which is another kind of like procedural film that opens up with a courtroom, and you sort of see someone who's reconciling with this thing that they've made that might be evil for humanity. And I think unlike Mark Zuckerberg in that film, which has a very interesting, compelling character study, he remains a cipher in a way that, you know, even Barbie has a lot more character development. You know, I think that's a very Nolan trope, these kind of men that have to contend with the fact that they have created evil in the world or in charge of somehow filtering out like goodness or what the man's role is in humanity. But I don't think it needed to be 3 hours long and disseminate that all in long courtroom montages for hours and hours and hours.
We have to leave it there, even though I want to talk about these movies for like literally 5 more hours, much like a Christopher Nolan movie. But in the meantime, I'll tell you this. I am in fact going to go see the Barbie movie again. But if I don't go do that, what else should I do with my weekend? I need some recommendations from you. Chandler, I'll start with you.
I think if you're in the mood for a great summer movie, Luis de Filippis is something you said last night is so great, and it's playing across Canada now. The movie premiered at TIFF. It's a trans filmmaker making their first feature, and it's this really funny, warm, grounded movie just about like a super Italian family on summer vacation. And Julia Fox is now an executive producer of the movie, and it's just really, really delightful. So something you said last night.
I love a delightful recommendation. Thank you for that. Let's go to Kristy. Kristy, what about you? What do you think?
So this weekend, the end of Venture Brothers is available on digital. It is a movie called Radiant is the Blood of the Baboon Heart. And after 20
what a title.
years...
Thank you.
It's amazing. After 20 years, Doc Hammer and Jackson Public are bringing an end to the Venture Brothers story. And it's bittersweet because, like, as a fan, you don't want to say goodbye. And as creators, they are not happy that this is how it's ending because they were supposed to get another season. You can read about all this on Mashable. I wrote about it and I have a lot of feelings. But yeah, it's if you love the Venture Brothers, this is an absolute must-see.
Okay, to-do list, read Kristy's feelings and then watch this. I'm done.
Yes.
Let's go. Let's do it. Jason, last word to you.
Yeah, I had to spend my weekend catching up on the singles off of Roisin Murphy's upcoming album Hit Parade, which is great. She's an Irish singer. These are all perfect singles for going out on the beach. The album isn't releasing until September, so you've kind of got to tide yourself over with some singles, but they are absolutely fantastic. I would really recommend listening to Cool or The Universe next time you're at the beach. It's really, really fantastic.
Chandler, Jason, Kristy, I just want to thank you for being here on this very special Barbenheimer Day. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's
Happy
great.
Barbenheimer to you all.
And a Barbenheimer to us all.
Oh, yeah. Incredible. What a day. Helping us celebrate this very special Barbenheimer Day, film critic and filmmaker Chandler Levack, Vulture Culture writer Jason P. Frank, and Mashable's film editor Kristy Puchko. Barbie and Oppenheimer, as you have heard, are out in theaters right now.
Oh, the good life, full of fun, seems to be the ideal.
And that is it for our show today. But listen, before we let you go, I have some sad news to share, which is that the legendary Tony Bennett died on Friday morning at 96 years old. Tony is that rare pop and jazz superstar with just unbelievable longevity, right? His career spanned more than 7 decades. In that time, he won something like 19 Grammy Awards and a Lifetime Achievement Grammy on top of all that. People, maybe of younger generations, might know him for his collaborations with Lady Gaga. He spent quite a bit of time over the past decade collaborating with contemporary pop stars. The New York Times had this great quote from Frank Sinatra, who was Tony Bennett's friend and mentor. Sinatra said, quote, "For my money, Tony Bennett is the best singer in the business. He excites me when I watch him. He moves me. He's the singer who gets across what the composer has in mind, and probably a little more." So let's hear a little bit more what Sinatra's talking about. We're going to go out on Tony Bennett and The Good Life.
Like the heartaches, when you learn you must face them alone.